Only a few short years ago, it seemed like plant-based meats were the way of the future. McDonald's, Burger King, KFC, Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, and more were all announcing their own takes on faux meat meals. Big-name investors like Bill Gates, Leo DiCaprio were pouring their wealth into brands like Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods, and celebrities were giving their coveted seals of approval. But since then, fast food chains have been backing out of deals. Shares have dropped significantly, and the industry hasn't even put a dent into beef sales. So what happened? And is there any coming back? This video is sponsored by Ground News. You've probably heard it said that eating meat will destroy the planet. That if you don't cut back on your meat consumption, climate change is gonna sneak into your window at night and stab you in the throat with a knife. Now, I am definitely oversimplifying a very complex and nuanced piece of scientific research, but that's kind of not the point, because this isn't a story about science. It's a story about perceptions and how those perceptions determine the success or failure of an industry or even a planet. I got something in my eye. See, the fake meat or plant-based or vegan meat business was built on the moral failings of our industrialized meat industry. We've been eating meat for over 2 million years, and since then, meat consumption globally has been on the rise. As meat consumption has become more popular, we have had to scale up our meat production to meet that demand, and that has resulted in a variety of really big changes in how that meat is raised and then killed. And with the internet giving us more access to information than ever before and increasing issues relating to those new practices, we've started to question meat in ways that we never have before. Suddenly, eating red meat became a taboo in a bunch of ways that wasn't just about saving the planet. There's been headlines about the scale of factory farming just getting out of control, the inhumane treatment of the animals, and the questionable things that we're feeding them, and the health impacts of a meat-focused diet on so many parts of our lives, including whether or not you're able to get a boner when you want to. I'm gonna have to read that article a little bit closer. Honestly, in the research of this video, we realized that we could probably do a whole mini series on cows alone and the insane amounts of money behind and against this industry. So let us know if you'd like us to make a video about on that. But the takeaway here is that at the peak of all of this insanity, there were a lot of arguments at family barbecues about what meat or non-meat you were going to eat and what that said about you as a person. So in response to the new research about climate change and this new skepticism of the meat industry, the fake meat industry was born. This was not going to be the tofu or the tempeh we took from some other culture or the black bean veggie burgers our hippie moms made, but this was an alternative meat product directly aimed at meat eaters. And I honestly think that for a lot of people who pioneered this industry, it was with good intentions. Early adopters were there because they truly believed that reducing our reliance on animal products will be a net gain for the entire world. And for many people, the innovations felt like a much needed breakthrough. Around the time that these meats were peaking in popularity, the world was completely focused on the climate crisis. The Fridays for the Future protests and global climate protests were happening all over the place and making headlines. And these new meat alternatives felt like a way for us to have our burgers and eat them too. But there were also a lot of business moguls who recognized that if they could break into a whole new food category, they would have a market share of a very valuable industry. The brands that famously took the lead in this race were Beyond Meat and Impossible Foods. Both of these companies set out with a similar idea. If they could create plant-based meats that taste the same as real meats, they had it made. Other brands, of course, have tried this in the past, but they sucked, and these companies had a fresh new take and a marketing team behind them that could propel them into greatness. Because the thing is, they actually did a very good job of mimicking meat. If you've ever eaten a Beyond or Impossible burger, you know that it was pretty close. They created a totally cow-free product that looks and sizzles and even bleeds like the real deal, all the while providing a similar taste and supposedly similar, even more more healthy nutritional profile. They had created the perfect food, something every soul on the planet could get behind, and the market responded accordingly. Stock prices for Beyond Meat went through the roof, and established mega brands started announcing their own takes on meat-free meat. Big names like Snoop Dogg and Kyrie Irving were investing, and huge deals were signed with massive chain restaurants. Suddenly, people across the country and the world were seeing fake meats in their grocery stores for the first time ever. For a while there, it looked like we were at the beginning of a whole new food chapter in human history. Except, that's not really how things went. Now, as we've mentioned, today the fake meat industry is a shell of its former self, but not completely dead, and we're gonna talk about that a little bit more later on. But I think that it's important to understand what went wrong, how we went from Impossible's Pat Brown legit talking about sending the entire $500 billion beef industry into a death spiral, to both of them reporting significant share losses and Impossible considering a new exit strategy within the next 3 years. Now, this is also interesting because the plant-based milks haven't suffered as much as the meats have, and we actually have an upcoming video about this coming up on this channel, so make sure that you are here, subscribe to the channel to make sure you see that when it comes out. But first, I want to share my opinion. I personally think that the issue has to do with the approach that the fake meat industry used to try and pit consumers against each other. The whole thing felt like the two-party system of politics in the US, where people found themselves stuck between two options that suck. Do you go with the sketchy factory farm meat or the rushed scientific experiment? But even worse, it's created this social dynamic where if you want to eat a burger, you're an asshole, and if you want to eat a plant-based burger, you're an environmentalist with an agenda. The whole dialogue about this new product was very adversarial in nature, and it made the choice to go plant-based more difficult, in my opinion. A huge reason for this was the plant-based giants' rollout of their proposed takeover. The strategy for these large brands was to avoid the vegans and the vegetarians and target meat eaters specifically. The idea being here that if their goal was to reduce meat consumption, the vegans were already on board. And if they're going to be a massive disruptive industry that they hope to be, they can't just be popular with the fringe environmentalists. This moral stance just pushed the die-hard meat eaters away from the movement and pitted people against each other. They ignored the people who might have been enthusiastically buying their products to chase after the aloof ones who weren't particularly interested. Basically, they're targeting the kind of person who will only change habits if it's trendy or easy. And that's not really the most stable consumer base. Now, my opinion aside, I have to say that in part the strategy must have been successful because, at least according to the Impossible's website, more than 90% of people who eat plant-based meats also eat regular meat. But part of the problem here is that these aren't actually food companies in the traditional sense. They're a little bit more like science labs that openly take cues from the tech industry. Now, this is not to be confused with lab-grown meat, which honestly could be its own video subject on its own. The lab-grown stuff is made using animal stem cells, and while it isn't really ready to be produced for the mass market just yet, it could also potentially be a threat to the giant agricultural meat industry. But in the research for this video, we found out that cultivated or lab-grown meat was actually banned in the state of Florida, and other states might be following suit. We learned about this wormhole of research through Ground News, an app and a website that is dedicated to gathering thousands of news articles all in one place to give you the full context. We keep working with them because we love their platform and we think that you would love it too, so feel free to check them out at ground.news/futureproof. So here you can see that there are over 15 sources covering this story with context to where each source falls in the political spectrum, how reliable they are, and who owns them. A cool thing about Ground News is that you can compare all the articles in one place, so you can understand what's really happening. Yellowhammer News tells us that it's the second state to ban lab-grown meat, whereas The Blaze says banning lab-grown meat is peak culture war. I love being able to see all sides of the political spectrum because it lets us know things like where the left might be providing a more neutral analysis of the legislative developments, the right is emphasizing political intentions and their impact on consumer freedoms. Another awesome feature is their blind spot feed, which shows you what the left and the right are and are not focusing on. Here, you get easy access to the other side's news reality to see the full picture of what's going on in the world. This is especially important if you rely on social media for your news, which more and more people are today. So we encourage you to go and dive right in by going to ground.news/futureproof, or you can scan this QR code to get started. You can join for less than $1 a month or use our link in the description to get 40% off their unlimited access Vantage plan, which is what we use here on the channel. Thanks for sponsoring Ground News. Now let's get back into it. For companies like Beyond and Impossible, rapid innovation is the cornerstone of what they do. And this quote from Beyond CEO captures their methodology in a very interesting way. He says,
"We're going to move more quickly than anybody else, and we're going to fail and recover more quickly."
On paper, this is because the world is about to end and we need solutions now. But it's also an issue of getting investors and consumers excited about the potential of this shift. We're a novelty fixated generation, and this kind of product is partially dependent on that ooh factor that people get when buying the product for the first time, or the money that could be made by investing in their stock. And probably rightly so, Impossible has been accused by critics for being led by PR and investor hype, instead of motivated by solutions that have proven beneficial for both the environment and public health. Now, of course, Impossible has many arguments to back up their position, including scientific research and the FDA's go-ahead, but that didn't stop people from being skeptical of this new category. The tech industry's move fast and break things motto might make sense for Facebook and Google, but some are of the opinion that maybe food companies shouldn't be breaking things when our bodies and the planet are the thing that are at stake. According to Bloomberg, in 2020, half of Americans thought the faux meats were healthy, and now 38% think so. And so these companies have had to respond accordingly. After Beyond's catastrophic fall in stock market value, they announced a shift away from their growth above all else operating model. They've scaled down, listened to complaints, and are now focusing on a new line of products made with avocado oil, 20% less sodium, and even shorter ingredients list. Of course, the irony here is that many of these same arguments could be levied against the real meat industry at the same time. They're using antibiotics and hormones, and the same GMO and health concerns that people raise about fake meat are being raised about real meat too. But because fake meat is the new technology, it comes under far more scrutiny. And this bias could have huge implications for plant-based meat's future. But now listen, beef and other meats have reported health risks and are terrible for the planet. And yet, most people are still eating it. And the biggest reason why is money. If you go to Walmart's website right now, you will find 6 Beyond Meat burgers for $17, or you can buy 8 beef burgers in the freezer section for $11. And this right here, for a lot of people, is where the conversation ends. Meat alternatives were built on the premise of being better for the planet than their animal-based counterparts. But when people don't have enough money to afford the basic necessities, they've got other priorities. This is basic Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like, if you aren't able to feed yourself, you don't give a shit about the environment. Now, part of the reason why plant-based meats are more expensive is because they're competing with a heavily subsidized, firmly established industry. The cost of meat that you see in the grocery store is not a true reflection of what it costs to raise a cow and butcher it, but rather a complex web of inputs and outputs and government policy. The meat and dairy industry receives $38 billion a year in subsidies in the US alone. If you compare that with Beyond Meat's total market cap of about $450 million, you can see how it might be a little hard for them to compete. Add this to the fact that it costs money money to develop a new product from scratch, market to a whole new customer base, bring things to scale, and then maybe even try to make it with ingredients that don't suck. And honestly, it would be surprising if they were even able to be on par with real meat prices. The reality is that plant-based burgers are a luxury item for most people today. And with all of that said, the industry still isn't dead yet.
'Tis but a scratch.
A scratch? Your arm's off.
No, it isn't.
Just last year, Impossible stated that they're doing pretty well these days, all things considered. The Impossible Whopper is still on Burger King's menus, even if sales aren't what they used to be. Beyond, after a huge plummet, has since scaled back their operations. They've shifted their focus, and they're really hoping that this new Beyond Burger is gonna be the thing that turns it around for them. We have to remember that this is still a new technology that has already improved on a few different metrics. In particular, Impossible and Beyond have both been working on the price issue for years, and have already seen some success in this endeavor. It's like the plant-based movement needed to be taken down a peg, right? They were an over-enthusiastic 18-year-old who thought that they knew everything, and then somebody put them in their place. But now, with the dust starting to settle a little bit, we're seeing a more nuanced and realistic view of what this category might look into the future. This initial explosion of the industry is proof that we will buy things that we think are better for our health and for the planet as long as we can afford it. But the capitalist system that we're in sometimes gets in the way of the progress that we're really looking for. See, our solutions for pretty much every problem that we have today is 1, invent something cool, 2, create a business around it, and 3, pray to the free market gods to sort out the rest. But we forget that the gods often have their own agenda. One of the things that we were struck by when we were looking and researching into this video is just how much money is behind all of this. Remember that this is fundamentally a story about the business tycoons of our world dueling it out to see who has control over our food. Just like political leaders and their parties today, the most powerful people know that they will see more success by villainizing their opponent or enemy rather than working on genuine solutions to the problem that they need to fix. You have to understand that the massive explosion of Beyond Meat as a stock and its inevitable downfall made a lot of people money. On one hand, you have Beyond Meat railing against big beef for painting their processes in a bad light. Meanwhile, mega billionaires like Bill Gates fund major news outlets that just happen to push the plant-based agenda in a way that benefits his investment. And I know you might be thinking, look, we're drifting into tin hat territory with this one.
God breaks Bill Gates.
I mention it because we need to understand that the messages we're hearing from both sides are not unbiased. Just go and download Ground News already. As much as we would like to believe that it is as easy as meat bad, plants good, or vice versa, there is a huge spectrum here of better and worse practices that seem to be largely ignored with all of the clickbait headlines that you see nowadays. But we are in a really interesting spot right now because the hype has died down and people can now try a plant-based burger without the same sort of social implications that it did just a couple of years ago. And one paradoxical result of plant-based foods becoming more popular is that there's been a renewed interest in grass-fed beef and more ethical meat sources. These are small-scale producers who are hardly even in this conversation because they simply don't make enough money to be considered, but offer a lot of people another option outside of the industrialized food system. A big one that's made lots of headlines and been featured everywhere is Polyface Farms, but a quick Google search in your area and you'll probably find a whole slew of micro farms within a few hours of you that are trying to do things a little differently. But perhaps the most powerful thing that's come from this whole thing is just the increasing awareness that you don't have to be a vegan to cut back on meat. John Green recently started advocating for beef days, basically designating a certain day or 2 or 3 or whatever of the year to consume beef to make it more of an occasion. This doesn't frame beef as a forbidden or bad choice, but one that people can consume in a more intentional way. And with plant-based meats and tofu and tempeh and beans and all the other options that are available today, I'm sure that you can find something else to eat on the other days of the year. Thank you so much for watching today's video. If you want to see our next episode about plant-based milks, make sure you're subscribed and we'll see you every week for another upload.
You be visited by the Spirit of God.